The following is the prompt that was given to the IEPC course students in the English program for adolescents in the writing section of the midterm exam.
Write a story using the beginning below. Include between 120 to 180 words. It was a beautiful morning, and I would have never expected that what I am going to tell you now would change my life forever.
This is a student's writing.
Now that you have read the composition written by a student who is in the IEPC course in the English program for adolescents, let's see how it can be scored using the writing assessment rubric designed for the B2 level of proficiency. First of all, since the student fulfilled the 3 prerequisite task completion descriptors, the discourse mode, the pattern of exposition, and the length, at least 80% of the requirement, her composition can be assessed.
The first criterion to assess in a written text based on the rubric is coherence and cohesion. This criterion consists of 2 different descriptors. The first one is produces clear ideas. The piece of writing is easily understood. It is clear what she means in each of her statements. Most of her ideas are relevant to the given prompt. Each idea makes the story coherent and understandable. So, the grade for this descriptor is 5.
The second criterion is uses sufficient cohesive devices correctly. The composition is a narration with poetical features. Even though the piece of writing shows different literary devices, it doesn't necessarily mean that the text doesn't require cohesive devices for achieving a smooth flow and relation of ideas. On the other hand, the cohesive devices the student does use are used correctly, and they attest for a consistent coherence throughout the text. Therefore, the assigned grade in this descriptor is 5.
Now let's see how to get the final grade for coherence and cohesion. Remember, there are 2 descriptors in this aspect: production of clear ideas and accurate production of an ordered sequence of ideas using varied cohesive devices. For the first one, the grade was 5, and for the second one, the grade was 5. So we just have to add 5 and 5. Divide the total by 2, the number of descriptors, and the result, 5, is the final grade for coherence and cohesion.
Let's go on to the second aspect of the rubric, language mechanics. It also has 2 descriptors: uses conventions of print accurately, and spells the vocabulary studied up to the current course accurately. Out of those, there are about 13 conventions wrongly used or not applied at all. Let's see some examples. Little pieces of wings were everywhere. My beautiful daughters, the fairies, were crying like a river, feathers of every color. In the previous excerpt, the student is wrongly putting a comma after the word everywhere. Instead, he needs to put a period since it is a complete independent idea. Following, he has to begin with capital letter after the period. Moreover, the phrase, the fairies, must be between commas because it is emphasizing who his daughters are. Finally, there must be a period after the word river because once again it is a complete idea, and finally capital letter after the period. So, it would be, little pieces of wings were everywhere. My beautiful daughters, the fairies, were crying like a river, feathers of every color. As a result, taking into account the errors and omissions the student committed in regard to conventions of print as well as his accurate use of them, the given grade for this descriptor is 4.
Regarding the second descriptor, spells the vocabulary studied up to the current course accurately, there is not a single word the student misspells in the composition, so the grade to this descriptor is 5.
Finally, let's do the math to get the final grade for language mechanics. Remember, there are 2 descriptors in this aspect: uses conventions of print accurately, and spells the vocabulary studied up to the current course accurately. For the first one, the grade was 4, and for the second one, the grade was 5, so we just have to add 4 plus 5, divide the total by 2, the number of descriptors, and the result, 4.5, is the final grade for language mechanics.
Let's continue with the third aspect, vocabulary, which only has 1 descriptor, uses varied vocabulary required for the current course accurately. First, there are few cases in which the student uses words incorrectly. Let's check the different cases. But this supposedly eternal harmony didn't last what I had thought it may last. In this sentence, the student should have used the word would instead of may to refer to the future in the past. Feathers start falling of the magical trees. Here, the student should have used the word from and not the word of. I could see throw their chests. The correct word in this sentence is through. Thirst of power. We say thirst for power and not thirst of power. I refuged, and refuged my family. The correct forms to use the word refuge are to give refuge to or to take refuge.
Second, there is a broad variation of vocabulary in the text. There is not a sense of overuse or repetition of words. Moreover, the style the student chose to write this composition implies the use of a wide vocabulary which is evident in the text. Accordingly, the given grade to this descriptor is 5. Now let's get the grade for this third aspect. There is only one descriptor, so the grade for the descriptor becomes the grade for the aspect. That is 5.
Finally, we get to the last aspect in the rubric, structure. It also has a single descriptor, which states a high control of the grammatical structures required for the current course. Most structures used in the text are correct. There are minor errors which do not hinder legibility of ideas. For example, this lazy babies. Here, there is no agreement between the demonstrative adjective this and the noun babies. The correct way to say it is these lazy babies. My beautiful daughters, the fairies, were crying like a river. The mistake here is that we have a single sentence or idea isolated by periods. So the past continuous cannot be used since it refers to an action that was in progress at a certain time in the past, which is not specified by the student when he says, "My beautiful daughters, the fairies, were crying like a river." Then, the student should have used the simple past to say, "My beautiful daughters, the fairies, cried like a river." Little pieces of wings were everywhere. Feathers of every colour start falling.
The story in the text is set at past time, and so it is narrated. Then the student must have said, "Feathers of every color started falling," and not "Feathers of every color start falling." They worth tons of gold. Here the student must have inserted the word were between the words they and worth to turn the noun worth into a verb and thus correctly say, "They were worth tons of gold." Looking for someone brave that someday may let us free and may let the colors cover again the gray suits. In this case, the student must have omitted the definite article the, since there is no explicit mention which colors the idea refers to. Finally, in the sentence, "Let the colors cover again the gray suits," the adverb again is incorrectly placed within the sentence. It should go at the end of the idea, since it is an adverb of time. So we would say, "Let colors cover the gray suits again."
All in all, the grade for this text regarding the student's high control over grammatical structures is 5. Once again, there is only one descriptor for this aspect, which means the final grade for structure is 5.
To end with this exercise, let's do the math to get a definite score for this written composition. First, we add the grades given for each of the 4 aspects in the rubric. So, we have 5, coherence and cohesion, plus 4.5, language mechanics, plus 5, vocabulary, plus 5 for structure, which equals 19.5. This number is divided by 4, the number of aspects, and the result, 4.87, is the definite grade for this piece of writing.